This is chapter number 6, Peasants and Farmers. Peasants and farmers we are talking about. So we will talk about the peasants and farmers, especially end of the 18th century and starting of the 19th century. So we'll divide the discussion into three parts. First is we'll talk about England. Why England? I'll just tell you. What was happening there with peasants and farmers? So first we'll talk about England. Then we'll talk about America. And then the peasants and farmer in India, that is Bengal. Now, what are the similarities and what are the events which took place? You will see that a lot of similarity is there. What we have discussed in the previous discussions is about the pastures and forest and how these shifting cultivators, pastoral groups and tribals, they got affected because of the restrictions and controls of the governments or the colonial governments. So as I said, we will talk about small cottagers in England first, and then wheat farmers of the USA, and then finally we will discuss about the opium producers of Bengal. Now, because of this modern agriculture which came in, how things change, and the capitalist market or world market, because of the changes in different parts of world, how the lives of peasants and farmers change. So why we are discussing England first? Because of the agriculture revolution first occurred here. So we'll start with an event and see, when I talk about this event, there will be a culmination of this event here, and this is the culmination, that is the Captain Swing riots we are talking about. So we will talk about an event and then we'll come in the conclusion saying that this riots happened. So when the riot happened, when something of this sort happens, there are chain of events. So what are these chain of events which took place in England so that this riot came into picture? And what were these riots? We'll talk about. The first thing is, on 1st June 1830, a farmer in the northwest of England, he found his barn and haystack reduced to ashes by fire. And this fire, this just doesn't happen to this farmer. This happened to numerous districts. Fire, sometimes the only the rick was burned, sometimes entire farmhouse was burned. And on the night of 28 August 1830, a threshing machine, we'll talk about this threshing machine because this was the event which culminated into the riots. So the threshing machine of a farmer was destroyed by laborers in East Kent in England. And after that, there were around 387 threshing machines which were broken. And now the farmers received a threatening letter. So there was a letter urging them to stop using these threshing machines that deprived the workmen from their livelihood. So there was a letter. Farmers were getting letter, and in the you see this letter was signed by Captain Swing. That is the name came from. And this was happening a lot, so government took stern action, and around 1976 prisoners were tried. 9 of them were hanged, 505 transported, over 450 to Australia, and 644 were put behind bars because of these things which were happening. Now this Captain Swing is a mystic name, but who were the people who were supporting this swing? Why this was happening, and why were these threshing machine being destroyed? So this was the event of riots, but we will see now what actually infuriated things or those events which took place. Over the late 18th and 19th centuries, the English countryside, it changed dramatically, because before this time, large parts of England, the countryside was open. It was not partitioned into very enclosed land that are privately owned by landlords. So peasants, they cultivated on a strip of land around the village they lived on. That is, this is the village. So they used to cultivate here, and this is an open land. Everyone could, either you or me, this is open to us. So what happens at the beginning of each year, a public meeting, each villager, say this one, you or me, they are given certain land, and because all the lands are not of same type, the good land, that is where cultivation is possible, is given, a part of this is given to him, and a part of land which is not cultivable is given to him. That is, a kind of equilibrium is maintained. A good and bad land is being given to everyone. Now all villagers, they have access to these commons. So this is the common area, everyone could access this, right? So these places, the villagers, their cow and their sheep grazed. They could collect the fuel wood for fire, berries and fruit for food. They also could fish, and there are certain things, they can also hunt rabbit. And for the poor people, this common land which is owned by everyone is very much essential for their survival, because they can access them, and if they have some problem, then this always help them in bad times if the crop failed. Now, how the things changed when the price of wool, now this is very important event, when the price of wool went up in the world market in the 16th century, the farmers which were rich, they wanted to expand this wool production, because this was a profit earning business. So they now want to improve the sheep breeds and also want to ensure them good food. For that, what they need to do, they need to control large areas of land in compact blocks to allow improved breeding. So what they did, they began dividing and enclosing common land and building hedges around their holdings to separate their property from others. That is, say this is a rich farmer. Now he has this land. Now he made this land this much bigger. Why? He took the commons land, the land which belonged to everyone, because he wanted to earn profit from wool. Now because of this area belonged to commons, and those villagers who had small cottages in this common, they were just pushed off, and they are prevented from entering this enclosed area. So they have put a hedge also, that is a boundary, bada bandi they have done. And this was pretty slow previously, and it was also not supported by the state of church. But after the mid 18th century, this enclosure, this hedging or this boundary making, this came into picture, and between 1750 to 1850, 6 million acres of land was enclosed. You can understand that in just mere 100 years, 6 million acres of land was enclosed, which were actually commons land. And also British Parliament did the same thing. They passed 4,000 acts, that is, they legalized these enclosures. If I can give you an idea through a picture, this is the rioting which was taking place, and these are the numbers in the circle given how many threshing machines were broken. See, in this area it is 85 machines are broken, or broken by some people who are Captain Swing supporters or sympathetic to this movement. Now this first thing happened was the wool, that is, they want to increase the profit through wool. Then another thing happened, which is the demand of grain. Previously it was sheep farming, but now in the late 18th century, the lands are being enclosed because the farmers wanted to grow grain production. So now here the idea of getting more land is changing. From mid 18th century, the English population rose exponentially. That is, it went from 7 million to 30 million. That is, from 1750 it was 7 million, and then in 1850 it was 21 million, and in 1900 it rose to 30 million. That is, people increase. That means the food grains also need to be increased in order to feed the population. And also at that time Britain was industrializing, and most of the people, they are going to urban areas. When people go to urban areas, they have to depend on the market for food grains. They are not producing themselves. So that is why the food grain market expanded actually rapidly. So that is how this Balabandi or the enclosure also increased. And then one more thing happened. France was at war with England. Now the import of food grain from the Europe was disrupted because of the war, and the price of food grain, they rocketed actually, and this also encouraged the landowners to enclose their land, to enlarge the area of grain under cultivation. So this enclosure, if this is the farmer, big farmer, he has enclosed the area from this area to this area. Why? First was wool, then for food grains, and then because of the shortage of import of food grains because of war with France. If you see, the price is how it hiked. This is from 1770 around to 1850. So if you see here at 1815 around, this rose exponentially, and this price, this is shilling per bushel. Bushel is a measure of capacity, and shilling is the English currency. 20 shilling is equal to 1 pound. That is 100 paisa is equal to 1 rupee. So you can understand like this: 1 pound is equivalent to 1 rupee here. So this is how the price hiked, and because of this reason, this Balabandi, or you can say the enclosure, increased. Here is a picture being shown by a painter called John Constable. So he wanted to show that how much open land was there and how these hedges were being formed. So these are the enclosures. These are hedges, enclosures, or the boundary, you can say. And these are the enclosures of common field by parliamentary acts. These areas which are below 5, that is the percentages of the enclosure, and if you see these central areas, these have high, that is 50 or above enclosures. As we said, there is one more thing which was very dramatic at that time in 1780s. What happens when the population rises? The food is always in shortage, but in England it happened in reciprocal way. That is, the food grain production increased as the population increased. In fact, the grain production in 1868, the English people or England was producing 80% of the food by themselves, by itself. Only 20% was being imported. And now this increase in food grain was not made possible not by any radical innovation in agriculture technology. They were doing it by themselves only, right? So how they were doing? They were actually capturing the pasture lands. They were carving up the open fields, cutting up the forest commons, and taking over the marshes, and also turn larger and larger area into agriculture fields. So when they have larger agriculture field, the food production, or you can say the grain production, is higher. But they also use some or the other simple innovations. I'll just give you an example. What were the innovations? In 1660s, they started growing turnip and clover. Now this turnip and clover, scientifically if you see, they provide nitrogen access to the soil. So because of this excess nitrogen, the soil becomes fertile. So these are the things which added up in the you can say production of good crop or good grains. And enclosures were always there. They were taking the other land, they are creating good grains. But at this time, the rich landowners, they were getting very rich because they are doing this. They have simple innovations also, and they have a lot of land also. But what happened to the people who were only you can say owning upon, or they were the poor people who had only idea about the commons land, or they are dependent on the commons land. Now enclosures filled the pockets of landlords. But what happened to the poor? The poor now, because they were stopped, because now it is the exclusive property of the landowner. So poor cannot go inside them. They are restricted. So they cannot bring the firewood from the forest. They cannot graze their cattle in the common area which belongs to them previously. They cannot collect any apples, berries. They cannot hunt small animals. That is, whatever is there, they have to buy now. And they were poor. They can't afford to buy it. And in the midlands, that is the area I showed you where the enclosure were 50 and above, because the people were deprived of their rights. So now they moved from the midlands, they moved to the southern counties of England. So this was the region that was most intensively cultivated, and this demanded laborers. So this is how poor went from the common place to the places where they could get some job. Now they have some masters now, and what happened? There was a different you can say following there, different tradition. That is, the laborers would live with the master. They will live with the master in their house only, or their nearby areas. Now in 1800, this practice started disappearing. Laborers were not kept. The laborers don't stay with their masters. They are being paid wages, and they are only employed when the harvest time is there. And the landowners, when they want to make profit, they just spend a meager amount to the workmen. Now the workmen, those people who were dependent on the common area, now they become unemployed. The job is unstable. Then the final nail to the coffin was the introduction of threshing machine. It was war with Napoleon Bonaparte. The price of the food grain were high, and farmers expanded production very vigorously. And now, because the farmers think that the laborers have drinking habits, it is very difficult for them to make them work. They started buying the new threshing machine, and this is their reason was they want to reduce their dependence on the laborers. But after this war ended, thousands of soldiers, which were basically peasants and farmers only, they came back. Now they had no job, because all the threshing machines have taken their job. They don't have any job because the threshing machine could do most of the job which were done by the laborers. So now this was the infuriation, or you can say this, because they were not having any job, they can't even get their livelihood. So this captain swing riot spread in the countryside, and that is how the threshing machine was bad to them. That is the sign of bad times. So what we have seen here today is the modern agriculture, when it came in England, that has various changes. The open field, which were called as commons, this disappeared. The rich farmers, they expanded grain production, sold the grain in the world market. They made huge profits and become powerful. But the poor left their villages. They went to from the midlands to the southern counties, where they can get very meager jobs, and the income of laborers were unstable, jobs were insecure, and livelihood was precarious. So this was the situation of England at early 19th century and end of 18th century. Now in the next discussion, we will be discussing about USA, the grain, what happened there. So till then, thank you so much. Take care of yourself.